My fiancé's best friend had just gotten her driver's license and was already giddy about borrowing my limited edition Porsche to show off. I said no. She went ballistic and trashed my car. The Porsche, now just a warped, scratched, shattered mess. Blue paint splattered all over the body, messy letters scrawled across the hood. The side mirror was smashed, the logo clawed to shreds, the smell of fresh paint mixed with metal. I went to Lucas Mercer, my fiancé, for an explanation. I hadn't even opened my mouth when Peyton stepped right in front of me, voice cold and full of challenge. "It's a woman-to-woman thing. Handle it yourselves. Don't stress Lucas out." I looked at her, then turned to him. Lucas barely glanced at me, his tone casual like it was nothing serious. "It's just a joke, babe. No need to make such a big deal out of it. It's just a car, right? Let's say you gifted it to me." I laughed, a soft but cold laugh, like metal scraping metal. Without another word, I pulled out my phone and dialed. "Cancel every investment I've made into the Mercer family." I said it slowly, clearly, not loud, not shaking. The call lasted less than 10 seconds, but by the time I hung up, Lucas's face had changed color. He jumped up, slamming his hand on the table. "Skylar Sterling, are you insane? Do you know how much damage pulling out now will cause?" I looked at him, calm, like every emotion had been drained out of me. "Didn't you just call off the engagement?" I paused for a beat, my voice dropping lower, sharp enough to cut air. "Then I have no reason to keep funding your crumbling company." I turned to leave, then looked back at him, eyes steady. "And one more thing," I said slowly. "10 million in damages. Have her pay me through you?" But I hadn't taken more than a few steps when Lucas raised his hand. 2 bodyguards in black suits immediately stepped in front of me. He walked toward me slowly, his voice cutting through the room, each word landing like a hammer. "Skylar Sterling, who do you think you are to call off this engagement?" I stood still, saying nothing. He smirked, that arrogant smile spreading across his face. "Don't think I don't know. Grandpa Sterling's family trust clearly states, you only get access to the voting shares if you marry Senator Mercer's legitimate son before turning 30. As of now, you're just the acting CEO. You don't have any real decision-making power." I blinked, but didn't respond. Grandpa's family trust had never been made public. Not even the Sterling and Company board knew the exact terms. Yet Lucas recited every clause as if he'd written the document himself. A chill ran down my spine. So, everything he knew about me, about my family, it wasn't coincidence. Lucas stepped closer. Only a hand's width between us. He reached out, pretending to gently brush my hair back behind my ear, and lowered his voice to a whisper. "If I were you, I'd apologize now. Maybe I'll be in a generous mood and let the wedding happen a little sooner." I still didn't move, but beside me, Peyton Whitmore stepped forward, draping her arm around my shoulders like we were old friends, her laugh dry and mocking. "I'd love to see it, honestly. The great CEO Sterling saying sorry. Wonder what that would look like." Then she pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen, opening TikTok. She was about to live stream, and in that exact second, I swung my arm. A slap cracked through the room. Peyton staggered back, crashing into the edge of a glass table. She clutched her stomach and let out a sharp, dramatic scream. "It hurts! Lucas! It hurts!" Everything happened so fast. I stood still, breathing steady, my eyes cold, like I hadn't moved at all. Lucas froze for half a second, then rushed over, gathering Peyton in his arms, helping her up. His face was red with rage. "Skylar Sterling, how dare you lay a hand on someone?" he shouted, but I only let out a quiet, contemptuous laugh. I brushed off the spot on my shoulder where Peyton had touched me, my expression disgusted. "Consider that a gentle warning," I said slowly, clearly, each word slicing the air. Next time you forget your place, I won't stop at just a slap. I thought that would be enough. But as I turned to walk away, Lucas yelled, "Hold her!" One of the bodyguards grabbed my arm, squeezing hard. Pain shot through my shoulder, but I didn't scream. I just turned my head, locking eyes with Lucas. He stepped in, voice lowered. "Skylar, apologize." Now my jaw clenched. My car had been destroyed. I was the one insulted. And now I was the one expected to bow my head? I let out a short, sharp laugh, like a knife being unsheathed. What if I don't? The room went silent. The only sound was Peyton's shallow sobbing from the floor. She slowly dragged herself upright, clutching her arm, face streaked with tears and snot, voice trembling. "Lucas, just forget it. It's my fault. I got hit." Lucas looked at her, eyes full of pity. Then, with a tone I had never once heard him use on me, soft, almost tender, he replied, "What are you saying? This has nothing to do with you. Skylar clearly did it on purpose." Then he turned to me, grabbed my chin tightly, forcing me to look up, his eyes blazing. "I'm not going to repeat myself. Apologize to Peyton. And maybe I'll pretend none of this ever happened." I stared at him. That face, that voice. This was once the man who had gotten down on one knee under the Hamptons lights to propose to me, the man who had held my hand through brutal meetings in Manhattan boardrooms. But now all that remained was a stranger, calculating, cold, manipulative. I spat on the marble floor, voice flat as steel. "You want me to apologize?" I lifted my eyes, staring straight into his. "Not a chance." And just as the words left my mouth, one of the bodyguards behind me shoved hard. My body lost balance, flung toward the glass staircase. The sound of impact rang out, sharp, cold. The world spun around me, and everything dissolved into a blur of blinding white. When I opened my eyes again, the first thing I saw was a blinding white light shining down from the ceiling. The sharp scent of antiseptic filled the air, and the steady beeping of the heart monitor echoed in the cold space. I was in a hospital room. My left wrist was wrapped tightly, my head pounding. Lucas sat there, right by the bed. When he saw me wake up, he exhaled in relief, his voice shaky, just enough to sound remorseful, but clearly rehearsed. "Skylar, I'm sorry. I only acted out of anger over the engagement being called off. I didn't mean to hurt you." He reached out, trying to take my hand, but I quietly pulled back. I said nothing. I just stared at the ceiling, where the white light poured down, cold, metallic. When I didn't respond, Lucas spoke again, this time softer. "Peyton's actually had a tough life. She's an orphan, alone in New York. I just wanted to help her, that's all. You get it, right?" I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, hearing the IV drip ticking steadily beside me. There was nothing left to say. This wasn't the first time he defended Peyton. The first time, she pretended to test my loyalty by filming a fake flirty video with Lucas. When I confronted them, they laughed and told me I was too sensitive. The second time, at our engagement party, Peyton held the ring in her hand and joked, "Let me hold on to it for Lucas so he doesn't lose it." When she gave it back, she pulled it straight off her own finger and placed it on mine, right in the middle of everyone's laughter. Every time I chose to stay silent, all I got in return was humiliation. And each time, Lucas would be there, saying soft words that made it sound like he was protecting me. But really, he was just making excuses for her. When I still didn't speak, he must have assumed I was calming down. Lucas scooted his chair closer, his voice dropping low. Gentle, but icy. "Skylar, could you delete the garage camera footage? It's just a car. Don't destroy her life over this." I turned to look at him. Slowly, like I was staring at a stranger. So that's why he was here. Not because of me, not because of the fall. He came to ask for the video, the one that proves his best friend vandalized my property. I opened my eyes fully, fixed them on him, a look that made him pause. "Lucas," I said, my voice hoarse but clear, "let's call off the engagement." The room fell completely silent. Lucas froze, eyes wide, then let out an awkward, forced laugh. You really thought this through? You're willing to give up the voting shares? He said it with a tremor, not because he was afraid of losing me, but because he was afraid of losing the privileges that came with the sterling name. I didn't respond. I just looked at him. For so long, he began to unravel. His face shifted. First surprise, then worry, then panic. He grabbed my hand, his voice rising. "Skylar, you're still upset about the bodyguards, aren't you?" "I swear I didn't mean for that to happen. If you're still angry, then hit me. Hit me, I won't fight back." And then, he grabbed the small flower vase on the side table and shoved it into my hands. I stared at him, baffled for a second, then laughed. What did he think? That if I smashed something, my heart would magically be okay again? I let go. The vase dropped to the floor, shattering into hundreds of sharp pieces. The sound echoed, high and clear, through the empty room. White rose petals spilled out, rolling across the floor beneath the bed. I followed them with my eyes and sighed. The broken shards caught the light, like our relationship, already cracked beyond repair. Lucas bent down, picking up the pieces one by one, muttering, "I'm sorry, I didn't want it to end like this." But I wasn't listening anymore. I was staring out the window. The New York sky was pale, veiled in mist. Somewhere out there, an ambulance siren wailed, steady, fading into the distance. And I knew, maybe what I just lost wasn't a man. It was the final illusion that he ever truly loved me. Right at that moment, the door swung open. Peyton walked in wearing a pure white dress, the soft silk draping like it was intentionally highlighting the innocence she'd plastered onto her face. She leaned gently on Lucas's shoulder, her voice as light as mist. "Maybe I should talk to Skylar alone?" I didn't look at Lucas anymore. I raised my arm coldly and pointed straight at the door. "Both of you, get out!" Lucas lowered his head, a flash of disappointment across his face, then quietly left. The sound of his shoes faded down the hallway. But Peyton didn't follow. As soon as the door clicked shut, she flipped like a page. Her fake smile stretched taut, her heels tapping rhythmically on the polished tile as she approached my hospital bed. "There's something I haven't had the chance to tell you yet. Turns out, we're family." My brows furrowed, heart skipping a beat. She reached into her clay-colored Hermes bag, pulled out a glossy photo, and shoved it in front of my face. Two people in the picture. A young man with a sharp nose, a girl clinging to his arm, sunlight flooding the windowsill behind them. "Back then, for money, my dad agreed to marry your mom and left my birth mother behind. Technically, I should be calling you Big Sister." A chill shot up my spine. Peyton was the child of my father and his first love? My throat burned dry. No wonder Lucas recited the terms of Grandpa Sterling's family trust, like he had it memorized. The smile on Peyton's lips turned from sweet to venomous, her eyes darkened. "Your mother destroyed my family back then, so now I'm stealing your husband. Call it even." So this, all of this, had been her plan all along. Heat flared in my chest like a silent fire. I threw the blanket aside, about to get out of bed. But Peyton moved like a snake, grabbed my wrist, her nude-colored nails pressing into my skin, leaving pale dents. She leaned in, and in one swift, practiced motion, pulled a slim dagger from the inside pocket of her coat, gleaming under the hospital lights. Before I could even call for a nurse, the blade sliced a short but deep line, like it had been rehearsed 100 times, straight down her own left forearm. "Ah!" Her scream tore through the air. Blood seeped through the white silk, blooming like a crimson flower. Fast, round, terrifyingly perfect. She collapsed onto the floor, her hands trembling, clutching my legs, whimpering like a trained actress. "Skylar, please don't kill me. I didn't mean to." The door burst open again. Lucas rushed in like a gust of cold wind. He didn't ask. He didn't look at the wound. He didn't see my empty hands. All he saw was the blood on Peyton's dress, and his reflex to protect her kicked in before logic could. One hard shove, my shoulder slammed into the wall, the IV line trembled violently. "I told you, if there's a problem, take it out on me. Why would you lay a hand on Peyton?" he yelled as he slammed the emergency button. Nurses and doctors flooded in, stretchers clattered, orders barked out in urgency. They lifted Peyton up, and just before disappearing through the door, Lucas turned back, his eyes pitch black, cold as steel, and threw a sentence straight at me, each word slicing through the air like a blade. "Skylar Sterling, I'm not letting this go." I collapsed onto the cold tile floor, my mind a tangled mess. Right and wrong blurred, real and fake indistinguishable. The footsteps in the hallway stretched out like an endless smear. I sat there for a long time, until night wrapped the hospital window in a black sheet. My phone buzzed. My assistant's voice cracked from panic. "CEO Sterling! Something's happened! There's been an incident at Hudson Yards." I shot up. "Report." "Material defect. Partial collapse on the 42nd floor. One worker dead, 2 seriously injured. Social media is blowing up. Reporters are swarming. Stocks dropping fast." I closed my eyes, the sound of blood rushing in my ears. And the materials had always been Lucas's responsibility. 15 minutes later, I stormed into the Sterling and Company headquarters lobby. My reflection in the glass looked pale, disheveled, but my steps headed straight into the private elevator. I was going to trace the cloud back up. Every email, every authorization document, every approval chain, anything to prove who signed off, who was responsible. The CEO office door swung open, and I froze. Lucas was sitting in my chair, leaned back slightly, wrist dangling like he was sipping tea. In front of him was my company laptop, the internal screen glowing black with white code scrolling fast, a script running line after line like slashes from a blade. The backup server was being wiped. My heart plummeted. "Stop it!" I ran forward, but the 2 bodyguards, solid as walls, grabbed my shoulders and slammed me down into the leather chair. The seat was ice cold. Lucas rose slowly, adjusted his cuffs, and stepped toward me, one quiet movement at a time. The glow from the screen lit his face in a cold blue wash. "The project was under deadline," he said, like he was explaining a boring lecture. "The backups weren't ready." All I had was the signed authorization. From you, he tilted his chin toward the screen. "And now, the server's gone." I could hear every beat of my own heart. "3 lives," Lucas continued, his voice low, sharp as ice. "Consider that the lesson I've left for you, Skylar." My lips trembled from rage. "Because of Peyton, you let innocent people die. Was it worth it, Lucas?" I stood there, my shoulders still sore from the fall, my head ringing from the cascade of shocks. I tried to inhale, but the air had turned thick. My vision darkened at the edges, like ink spreading. The metal on the armrest was freezing under my fingers, but sweat still slicked the back of my neck. Someone called my name, distant and warped. The floor tilted slightly, then tilted more. I saw the glass door of the office blur into a strip of light. And just before everything cut out, like someone had thrown a switch, I heard Lucas's voice, still issuing orders. The darkness closed in. I was unconscious for a full day, waking up in a strange hospital. The moment I opened my eyes, Lucas tossed an iPad onto the bed like it was some lifeless object. The screen lit up with a stream of videos, posts, messages. "See for yourself," he said curtly. I flipped it over and saw everything exploding. The entire Hudson Yards workforce was on strike, banners stretched across the gates of Sterling and Company, the victims' families screaming for justice, reporters swarming in, and my name hashtagged straight to the top of trending. The comments were like lashes, tearing me apart, piece by piece, and at the center of that storm, every thread was pulled by a single hand. Lucas standing there, wearing a mask of righteousness. "You have no other option now. I'm the only one who can flip public opinion back in your favor," he said, his tone, if not kind, was at least convincingly fake. Then he stepped closer, his eyes lit with a cold glint. And what I want is simple. You apologize to Peyton and promise never to make her life difficult again. As if the entire world revolved around protecting her spotless white shoes. I laughed, looking at him like he was the lead actor in a ridiculous play. Let me say it again? You want me to bow to her? Keep dreaming. Lucas's face dropped, then darkened, every muscle in his face twitching. He nodded 3 times, like confirming a decision already made. All right, fine, perfect. Then he turned to the guards, barking a command like a general issuing a battlefield order. Get in here! From now on, watch her closely. No one gets in without my permission. He turned back, his eyes razor-sharp and frozen. Skylar, you do know Peyton's true identity now, don't you? She's also part of the Sterling bloodline. In fact, I never really needed to marry you. At the upcoming wedding, the bride will be Peyton. She's going to rejoin the Sterling family and reclaim her inheritance. As for my family, they'll be investing everything into Sterling and Company. And you'll rot in prison for your mistakes. So that was it. He had known everything from the start, knew exactly why Peyton had come for me. And still, he chose her. I once thought this engagement was 2 people holding hands, walking forward together. Turns out, I had walked straight into a carefully engineered trap. At this moment, there wasn't even a flicker of feeling left in my heart. Only cold. And cruelty. When he finally left, I quietly opened the bedside drawer, pulled out the iPhone the nurse had slipped to me in secret, and dialed a familiar number without the slightest tremble. What you offered before, I accept. But I have one condition. I want Lucas to lose everything. On the other end, a low male voice replied, steady and firm, as you wish. Just minutes later, noise erupted outside the hospital room. Shouting, things crashing, then a sharp thud, like someone had been taken down. The door burst open. Grayson Mercer, in a black trench coat, white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, eyes gleaming with absolute cold, walked in. Behind him were Lucas's 2 bodyguards, now unconscious on the floor. Without saying a word, he came straight to me, carefully lifting me from the bed, his hands cold but steady. Don't worry, his voice low, calm. Everything's taken care of. Oh, and I prepared a little wedding gift for you, too. I nodded gently, didn't ask. Just threw on a coat and let him guide me out the door. Lucas still believed that as long as he married someone, that person would automatically receive the full share allocation Grandpa Sterling left behind. But he forgot one simple thing. The Mercer family had more than one son. And that clause in the family trust he thought was the golden key? It only applied to me. His entire life, he chased power without realizing the very rules he tried to exploit were never on his side to begin with. At the so-called wedding of the century that Lucas and Peyton had been loudly preparing, everything was dazzling. Crystal chandeliers lit up hundreds of evening gowns, champagne clinked softly, laughter mingled with the sound of string instruments. Reporters packed both sides, camera lenses sweeping across the gold-leafed room. Lucas, in a black tux, stood center stage like a king. Peyton, draped in a snow-white wedding gown, walked toward him amid a storm of applause. But just as the MC began to speak, the massive LED screen behind them, originally playing a slideshow of sweet, romantic images, suddenly went black. 1 beat of silence, then 2, then 3. Murmurs filled the room. Lucas turned back, frowning. "What's going on?" he snapped. The tech operator panicked, clicking wildly. Then suddenly, the screen lit up again, but no more romance. A video appeared. High resolution, fixed angle. Lucas, inside the living room of the Mercer penthouse. Half his face in shadow, his voice echoed coldly through the speakers. "Just do exactly what I say. Skylar Sterling's assistant is working for me. Contact him directly when the time comes. If anything goes wrong, blame it all on her." The room exploded like a bomb had gone off. Guests, business moguls, politicians, reporters, everyone stood up, gasping, cameras flashing wildly. Lucas froze. Peyton went ghost white, hands trembling around her bouquet. A few people even snorted, whispering, "God! He set her up?" "Turn it off now," Lucas yelled, lunging toward the stage, but no one could stop it. The system had been hacked remotely, full access locked out. He shouted, yanked the power cable. The screen went dark. But it was too late. Everything that needed to go viral had already been recorded, already sent. And across the ballroom, reporters were clicking like mad, each flash going off like a blade. "Who did this? Come out right now!" Lucas roared, voice ragged with fury. No one answered. Only hundreds of camera lenses aimed straight at his face. Peyton clutched his arm, voice shaking. "Lucas, someone planned this." It had to be. That sentence made him freeze for half a second. A flash of something familiar sparked in his eyes. Doubt. There was only one person with the motive, the reach, and the reason to humiliate him like this. Skylar Sterling. He stepped down from the stage, about to charge off. But Peyton gripped his arm tightly. "Lucas, don't go. There's no turning back now. First, finish the ceremony. Once I'm officially a Sterling, I can help you reverse this." She looked up at him, eyes lit with a manic gleam, dressed in blind faith and power. Lucas looked at her, their eyes locked, greed, calculation, and fear entangled. A long silence passed. Then he nodded, jaw clenched. "You're right," he said softly. "Power is the only voice that matters." Peyton smiled, placing her hand on his chest. Together, they stepped back to center stage. Just as the string quartet began playing again in the grand ballroom, the large doors at the far end of the hall suddenly swung open, causing every guest to turn their head. Attorney Ryan Holt, dressed sharply in a charcoal gray suit, walked steadily down the aisle. The chandelier light reflected off his glasses, casting a cold, precise aura. He wasn't here to celebrate. His voice rang out, crisp and deliberate, slicing through the murmurs. "Good evening, Mr. Mercer." "Miss Whitmore, I am the legal witness for the original family trust of billionaire Grandpa Sterling. Today, under the authorization of Miss Skylar Sterling, I am here to disclose the final terms of that trust." The entire ballroom froze. Lucas stepped forward slightly, about to speak, but Ryan Holt had already taken the mic. His eyes were stern, his tone steel-sharp as it echoed through the gold-leafed room. After Grandpa Sterling's death, all real estate and company shares were distributed publicly among the descendants. However, one sealed addendum was held privately, and its contents are as follows. Granddaughter Skylar Sterling, only if she marries a member of the Mercer family before the age of 30, shall inherit the full voting shares of the company. And this clause, he paused, looking directly at Lucas, applies solely and exclusively to Miss Skylar Sterling. It was like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Peyton stood frozen, lips trembling. Her wedding bouquet slipped from her hands and hit the floor, white petals shattering like glass. She rushed at Ryan Holt, yanking the folder from his hands, flipping through the pages, each rustle loud in the stunned silence. "This can't be real!" she screamed, voice cracking. "Why only Skylar? She faked this trust, didn't she? Say it!" Ryan didn't flinch. Not a muscle moved. His voice stayed calm and professional. "As an attorney, I am legally bound to verify the authenticity of this family trust." Mrs. Skylar Sterling had no intention of making this public. This was a private matter within the Sterling lineage. However, due to recent public defamation, she officially authorized me to release it today. Then, lowering his voice, he pulled out another envelope. "Additionally, Ms. Sterling has asked me to deliver this lawsuit notice to Mr. Mercer. Your wife vandalized her limited edition car worth tens of millions. If you fail to compensate within 3 days..." Lucas stood frozen in the center of the ballroom, legs unsteady. The overhead lights poured down on him, cold sweat beading on his forehead. The murmurs of the crowd swirled around him like a small storm. His lips parted, but no words came out. And in that moment, he finally understood. Why I'd been so calm all these days. Because to me, he had never been a rival, just a puppet in a meticulously arranged game. Ryan turned to leave, but Lucas staggered forward, voice hoarse, desperate. "Where is Skylar?" "I want to see her. I need to talk to her." But he never got an answer. From the entrance, 2 police officers walked in, their badges gleaming under the reporter's flashing lights. One held up his ID, voice firm. "Regarding the Hudson Yards incident that resulted in 1 death and 2 serious injuries, we have received formal accusations implicating you in direct involvement. You'll need to come with us for questioning." The soft clink of metal handcuffs echoed through the thick tension. Peyton covered her mouth and collapsed. And Lucas, in his expensive tuxedo, was escorted out between hundreds of flashing cameras. Everything he had used to mask the truth, reputation, marriage, media control, collapsed within minutes. Thousands of miles away, I sat inside Grayson's Sarth Gray McLaren 720S, watching my iPhone light up with a message from Ryan Holt. The New York Post headline blared on the screen: "Wedding of the Century at the Plaza. Deepfake scandal. Groom arrested in front of page 6. The story had shot to #1 trending, online discussions blazing. I looked out of the window, Manhattan glowing, the golden lights flickering across the windshield. The wedding I'd dreamed of for years was the very one I destroyed with my own hands. Grayson glanced over, a faint smirk on his lips. "What's wrong? Regret it now?" I shook my head, eyes focused on the cars ahead. "No, I just hate myself for ever believing him." He chuckled, low and sharp enough to split the silence. "Well, even if you did, it's too late now." Grayson opened the car door, pulled a prepared folder from his bag, and handed it to me. His gaze equal parts stern and soft. "Come on, it's time for you to make good on your promise." 3 years ago, the Mercer family exploded in what the press called an amicable divorce. But behind closed doors, it was brutal. Lucas's mother, his father's longtime lover, replaced Grayson's mother with a marriage certificate and a thin, triumphant smile. The first thing she did was exile Grayson abroad, canceled his cards, froze his accounts, and sent a cold-blooded email to the family's legal team. Reject all repatriation requests. At the time, I had just started seeing Lucas, too busy laughing at his syrupy promises of engagement to notice the scent of gunpowder simmering beneath a pride-driven dynasty. Until that London business trip. Rain pounded the city. The hotel door opened, and there was Grayson, leaning against the frame, hallway light splitting his face in half, one side in glow, the other in shadow. He looked me dead in the eyes, no soft preamble. "I came to take back what was mine, and also to steal you from him." I stood still, hand still holding the room key, feeling my heart shift rhythm like a stone had just dropped into deep water. "Grayson Mercer," I said slowly, "what do you want from me?" He answered, "A legal marriage. In return, I'll use my entire network and European resources to help you stand firm at Sterling and Company. My target is Lucas, and you look like you need that too." I studied him carefully. Compared to Lucas, Grayson carried the air of a true heir, calm, well-mannered, and born with the kind of poise that made every decision land exactly where it should. 23 years in the Mercer household had taught him how to wield power and strike back silently. No bluffing, no begging, only solutions laid out with keys already turned. I looked into his eyes and saw a certainty I'd been missing in myself. "All right," I said. We finalized the marriage quickly, took the certificate photo, and sent it straight to attorney Ryan Holt. The inheritance protocol for the voting shares activated like a set of interlocking gears. So seamless, it felt soundless. After that, we stayed in Manhattan for a few days. The temporary Tribeca apartment, pale oak wood, floor-to-ceiling windows, and the New York night like a map of stars. Grayson poured tea and placed it in front of me, his voice low. "We haven't known each other long." Even if we're married on paper now, it's fine. We can start from love. He didn't say it romantically, but like a commitment that came with accountability. I didn't turn him down. I began letting myself hear his footsteps in the kitchen, smell his cologne on the coat, slung over the chair, feel the way his hand lightly touched my back, crossing crowded streets. Polite, but with an undercurrent of quiet possession. One evening, Ryan's email arrived. All set. The entire transfer of voting shares was complete. I sat in front of the screen, opened the attached file, watching the string of legal language weave into something like steel mesh. From now on, my name was tied to the kind of authority that could pull out every nail Lucas had driven into the company the wrong way. The day I returned to Sterling and Company, Midtown, glass reflecting a gray sky, I stepped into the CEO elevator with a new keycard, feeling like I was finally coming home after a long, stormy war. But when the office doors opened, Lucas was already there. When he saw me, his face softened, like the weight of the whole world had just been lifted off his shoulders. He took half a step forward, his smile stretched thin as if trying to pull together a life already falling apart. "Skylar, I knew you'd come down to see me." He reached out, trying to take my hand. A gesture that used to be habit, used to melt me, used to mean something I cherished like a promise. But this time, I stepped back. Just one step. Not far, but enough to make it clear that a boundary had been drawn. His hand froze mid-air, fingers trembling slightly, before curling into a fist and slipping into his pocket. "I regret it, Skylar." Lucas's voice cracked at the end, like it was being strangled by his own shame. Everything before this was my fault. Can we get married? This time, you picked the date. I stood still, didn't blink. He kept talking, his voice lower now, pleading, like someone clinging to the edge of a riverbank as the current dragged him under. "You know the board is circling your voting shares. If you want to stay ahead, marrying me, just like Grandpa wanted, is still the safest path. He always said the Mercer family owed him a debt." That arrogant posture, the one that once crushed my dignity, was gone. In its place stood a man terrified of losing everything. I looked at him, silent for a few seconds, then asked slowly, "Didn't you once say Peyton was also part of the Sterling family?" "The two of you are already married, so the debt my grandfather owed is paid. You showing up here again? Does that make sense to you?" Lucas's face changed instantly. He shook his head, voice urgent. "No, Peyton isn't part of the Sterling family." Then his eyes locked onto something behind me, and suddenly he froze. I turned instinctively. Grayson had walked in, gray trench coat, steady stride, and that look in his eyes, like Manhattan itself, tilted around him. Lucas stammered, his voice sinking to rock bottom. Grayson didn't respond right away. He walked straight over, leaned in close to my cheek, and gently adjusted the strap of my coat. Just a small gesture, but enough to shatter whatever pride Lucas had left. Then he slid his arm around my shoulder and said calmly, "Of course I came to find Skylar." Lucas's eyes darted back and forth between the two of us, filled with disbelief. After a long pause, he dropped his gaze, tried to lower his voice, but his tone was sharp with bitterness. "Skylar, don't let Grayson fool you. He played nice just to win over my father. When I exposed him, he got kicked out. He's the kind of person who'll do whatever it takes to get what he wants." I didn't want to hear another word. I pulled out my phone, opened the photo of our marriage certificate, and held it up in front of him. "Lucas," I said slowly, my voice cold, each word scraping like a blade over stone. "If you ever speak trash about my husband again, I'll see you in court." The moment I finished, Lucas's eyes jolted in shock, fixed on the certificate in the photo, stunned, speechless. I turned away. Grayson's hand squeezed mine gently, not hard, just enough to remind me that this time I had someone walking beside me, not behind. We walked into the Sterling and Company headquarters. The marble floor reflected our silhouettes, 10 fingers intertwined. No hiding, no shame, no explanation needed. The news, Skylar Sterling's flash wedding to the true heir of the Mercer family, spread through Manhattan's elite circles like lightning. The whispers, the curious stares, the congratulations, half genuine, half speculative, all came pouring in within hours. A CT-11. That evening, Grayson's phone vibrated on the glass table, and the name Senator Mercer lit up like a cold blade. His voice was dry and sharp. "Come home immediately." It's important I didn't need to guess to know the trail led back to Lucas. I stepped forward, handed Grayson his trench coat, and spoke gently. "Let's go. I'm coming with you, after all. Grayson may not be the sole heir of the Mercer family, but he was still Senator Mercer's son." Returning to pay respects was the right thing to do. The Mercer estate in the Hamptons still smelled faintly of damp pine and old liquor. The moment the door opened, the senator pointed his finger straight at us, his voice like a hammer. "What have you done?" The living room was blindingly bright. Lucas sat between his parents, lounging, a cold smirk on his face, his eyes laced with smug provocation. I didn't flinch. I stepped forward and dropped each word onto the marble like nails. "The marriage was my idea." A vein twitched at the senator's neck, but he forced himself to retain the composure of a seasoned politician. "Skylar, don't forget, your grandfather made it clear. You were supposed to marry Lucas. And now you've gone and married Grayson without a word. How do you plan to explain this to the Mercer family? How do you explain it to your own bloodline?" I lifted the corner of my mouth in a cold smile. "Senator, even based on my capabilities alone, I'm more than able to control Sterling and company. And every turn I've endured, every wound I've taken, I will reclaim from the companies that dared defy the Sterling name." What I said wasn't just a statement, it was a warning. The Mercer family now was nothing more than a cracking shell, seconds from shattering. If I hadn't shielded them before, they would have collapsed in Lucas's hands long ago. And if I wanted to, Mercer would be the first name on the chopping block. The senator narrowed his eyes, his whole body tensing, but he understood exactly what I meant. The atmosphere in the living room turned deathly still. Eventually, it was the senator who broke the silence. He stepped toward his study, motioned to Grayson. "It's been years since I saw you. You've gotten thinner. Come, let's talk privately." Grayson gave a slight nod, glanced at me to reassure me, then followed him into the study. As soon as the two of them disappeared, Lucas stood up and came toward me. His voice carried a hint of desperation. "Skylar, I've already told Peyton. I won't see her again. I swear she won't appear in front of you." I smirked, as if Peyton even had the chance to appear before me again. She'd smashed my Lamborghini, couldn't afford the damages, and now the case was in court. Despite insisting she was part of the Sterling family, in the end, she was just an illegitimate child no one acknowledged. My parents had passed away, no way to verify DNA. And everyone else in the family were cunning old foxes, none of them foolish enough to back her and go against me. Peyton's so-called identity had long become a useless pawn. What face would she even have left to show up in front of me again? I looked down at Lucas's hand, gripping the hem of my coat. A thought flashed through my mind. Maybe the one they'd been trying to keep all along wasn't Grayson, but me. My gaze followed his arm up to his face. "Do you really like me that much?" Lucas thought he saw hope. He nodded frantically. "Yes, I like you." Lucas almost couldn't hold back his excitement. "We've been together for 3 years. Our bond runs deeper than anything you and Grayson have." Just then, a scream pierced the air outside, clearly the voice of the senator. A bad feeling hit me. I ran out, heading straight toward the garden. But when I got there, the sight froze the blood in my veins. The senator lay motionless in a pool of blood, a pair of scissors stabbed deep into his stomach, crimson soaking the gravel beneath him. Not far away, Grayson stood frozen, right arm still extended as if he had been about to catch him. "You animal! That's your father!" Lucas shouted, then struck Grayson across the face with a bone-crushing slap. He immediately called for the butler to summon an ambulance. Grayson seemed completely stunned by what had just happened. He held his face, trembling, stepping back in shock. It wasn't me. I didn't do it. I swear it wasn't me. His eyes drifted toward me, filled with fear and pleading. I grabbed his shoulders, choking back the tremble in my chest. Don't worry, I'm here. The ambulance screeched into the driveway. They dressed the wound and rolled the gurney away. I pulled Grayson back into the living room, trying to steady my voice. Tell me everything, minute by minute. But he shook his head, mute as if bolted shut. Not a word. That silence weighed like lead. And too conveniently, the exact spot in the garden had no cameras. He had the skills to defend himself, yet he stayed quiet. And that silence immediately became the noose the Mercer family tried to slip around my neck. I took a deep breath. What if this was a setup? What if Mrs. Mercer orchestrated it to stop the will from being changed, and Grayson stayed silent because, after all, he was still her son? Suddenly, every puzzle piece snapped into place. But theories needed proof. I pulled Grayson out of there. He stumbled like someone drained of blood. I didn't push. A CT-12. Early that morning, he said he wanted to go to the hospital. He's out of danger. I need to see him. I nodded, took the keys. Wait for me, I'll drive. I had just backed the car out of the garage, turned to look back, and Grayson was gone. A cold chill clamped down on the back of my neck. Just as I reached for my phone, it buzzed. A message from Peyton. If you want him alive, come alone, attached location, abandoned warehouse, Red Hook, Brooklyn. I stared at the screen, breath caught in my chest. No hesitation, I drove straight there. The warehouse reeked of salt and rust. Grayson was tied inside the car, slumped, breathing heavily. Peyton stood across from him, eyes flat like dead water, tossing a stack of papers on the table. I don't want much. Just your signature. Transfer all the shares your father left to you. Sign, and I'll let him go. I looked straight at her, not even bothering to hide my disgust. All this for a few shares? Even if you get them, you're still just an unacknowledged, illegitimate child. No power, no name, no seat at the table. Peyton's smile twisted. She lit a match, flame flickering like a glowing insect. Looks like you don't want Grayson alive after all. Wait, I yelled, sweat breaking on my back. I'll sign. I gripped the pen, its point sliced the paper with black ink like a blade. I threw the pen and ran to the car. Locked. Grayson was still out cold. I pounded the glass. It didn't budge. Behind me, Peyton's laugh echoed through the metal walls. Burn with him. The lighter dropped. Whoosh! The gasoline ignited instantly, flames crawling like rabid dogs. Heat blasted my face, my hair crackled. I grabbed a metal rod, swung with all I had. Crash! The glass cracked, shattered, shards slicing into my skin, blood spraying like wine on gravel. Grayson! Wake up! I reached through the glass, popped the lock, dragged him out, arm around my shoulder, pulling him through the black smoke. The fire stretched, blocked the path. Sirens screamed, boots pounded, orders shouted. The warehouse doors burst open. NYPD and firefighters stormed in. Peyton stumbled, but before she could recover from the panic, her wrists were twisted back. Click, cuffed. The agreement was yanked off the table, sealed into an evidence bag. Forced contract, void. Smoke curled overhead. I collapsed, knees to chest pounding like it would split open. Grayson leaned against my shoulder, his breathing steadier now. That night, the investigator sat across from me, yellow light washing across a cold steel table, voice low and measured. The Mercer Garden incident. It's clear now. They laid out photos from the side gate camera and location data. Mrs. Mercer appeared exactly during the window. The blood on her leather gloves matched the senator's type. Her fingerprints matched the scissors. Motive, the officer said, was to stop the will from being changed. Lucas, the one who covered it all up, was arrested by NYPD that night, before he could wipe his messages with Peyton. I leaned back in the plastic chair, cold soaking through my shirt, smoke still clinging to my hair. Somewhere, wind from the Hudson River dragged a siren long and thin, like thread stitching shut everything that had just been torn open. I closed my eyes. My fingers still smelled of rust and ink. The soft clicks of the crime scene cameras felt like quiet, final punctuation. Peyton was led away in cuffs, the void contract slipping from her hand like a broken toy. And Lucas, the one who chose the shadows, was now face to face with the darkness he helped build. A CT-13. I handed over all remaining matters to my legal team. After being discharged from the hospital, Grayson and I chose a late autumn afternoon to hold our wedding again, on the rooftop in Tribeca, overlooking the Hudson River shimmering under golden sunlight. No cameras, no large crowd of guests, no flashing lights. Just a few close friends, a string quartet playing Everlong softly beneath the sunset, and white petals drifting in the breeze. Grayson stood beside me, still in his neat black suit, but the look in his eyes had changed. No longer the boy with scars from being thrown out of his home, but a man who finally knew where he belonged. I looked up at him and smiled gently. The evening light reflecting in his eyes turned them into a shade of honey. People once said Grayson was just a child abandoned by both parents, a boy with no home. But from this moment on, I knew. We were home to each other. As the strings moved into the final bars of Everlong, I glanced around and saw everyone smiling. Ryan Holt stood quietly, raising his glass. A few of Grayson's friends chuckled softly as the wind swept my veil into the sky. I didn't say any grand vows. I just whispered into his ear, "From now on, we no longer have to protect ourselves alone." He squeezed my hand, nodded slightly, and those eyes, after all these years, finally carried the light of someone who had found a place to rest. And up there in the wind-blown air, as the city lights began to glow, I suddenly understood. Sometimes, happiness doesn't come from reclaiming what was lost, but from learning how to let go of what no longer deserves to be held. Some wounds only stop hurting when we stop touching them. And some people, even those who once made us lose everything, still end up teaching us what it means to rise again on our own 2 feet. I drove my car down into the basement of my husband's office building, and by chance I saw, right in front of me, my husband leaning against the hood, his hand on the cheek of a young blonde woman, their lips touching. Instead of screaming, I hit the gas. My car surged forward, making the woman scream, and my husband stepped back, his face drained of all color. I am Kimberly Evans, 36 years old, head of communications at Midwest Connect Media in Detroit. I used to think I was living the true definition of stability: a house in the Birmingham suburbs, a sweet daughter, and a successful husband who worked as the director of communications for Aurora Dynamics Incorporated, a NASDAQ-listed tech corporation headquartered in downtown Detroit. On the morning of our 10th wedding anniversary, Weston texted me, "Wear something navy tonight, it suits you." I laughed. I thought he was being thoughtful. I left work early, stopped by Somerset Mall, picked out a V-neck navy dress that felt both mature and feminine. I planned to swing by his office, Aurora Dynamics, to surprise him. In 10 years, I'd rarely done anything spontaneous, and today, I wanted to break the rule. Aurora's headquarters loomed in downtown Detroit, a sleek glass building reflecting the autumn sky. The parking lot was filled with Teslas, BMWs, and Lexuses. I spotted Weston's car in his usual spot, marked with a sign reserved for communications director. I was about to text him when I saw a familiar figure and froze. Between the rows of cars, Weston was leaning against the hood of a pink Porsche, his hand cupping the face of Tiffany Maxwell, the talented CFO 10 years his junior, whom I'd met a few times at company parties. Their kiss was slow, familiar, and utterly cruel. In that moment, time stopped. I didn't scream. I just felt something inside my chest break, quietly but definitively. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and recorded the scene. I didn't know why I did it, only that if one day he denied it, I would have the truth. When Weston turned around, his eyes met mine. I hit the gas. My car surged forward, screeching to a stop just in front of them. Tiffany screamed. Weston stepped back, his face drained of all color. I rolled down the window and said coldly, "Happy 10th anniversary. You really know how to surprise me." Then I drove off, leaving behind the burnt scent of rubber and a pride going up in smoke. On the way, I played Billie Eilish's Happier Than Ever, driving down Woodward Avenue, the street we once watched fireworks on after our wedding. Everything familiar suddenly felt foreign. I didn't know if I was sad or angry, only that I was awake. When I got home, I poured a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon from the wine collection Weston treated like treasure, opened my laptop, and sent the video to David Cho, the lawyer who once helped me draft a life insurance policy. I typed a single line, "Keep this for me." I need evidence for this marriage. I wasn't thinking ahead. It was pure self-defense, to keep the video somewhere Weston couldn't erase it. I sat looking at the wedding photos on the table, suddenly wanting to erase it all. I opened the photos folder on his laptop. His Apple ID had always been synced with mine. I started deleting image after image, until I paused at an unfamiliar file. silver_horizon_report.pdf. Curious, I clicked it open. A screen appeared showing wire transfers with enormous figures. Beneath the title was the name Silver Horizon Holdings Limited, Panama City, and the line, Beneficiary, Weston Evans. I blinked. My heart pounded. I scrolled down. Over $400,000 transferred overseas in 2 years. The same 2 years Weston got promoted and awarded stock bonuses. The wine turned bitter in my mouth. This wasn't just marital betrayal. This was a betrayal of the law. I saved the file and sent it to David with a message. "Can you check if this is an undeclared offshore account?" A minute later, he replied, "If this is legit, Kimberly, your husband is committing tax evasion. And Aurora could be under investigation." I went quiet, watching the light refract through my wine glass. So I've just opened the door he tried hardest to keep shut. I set the glass down, picked up my work notebook, and wrote, "Transparency begins tonight." When the doorbell rang, I found Martha Klein, my 62-year-old neighbor, a retired lawyer, standing there with a freshly baked apple pie. She smiled gently. "Saw your lights were still on. Thought something might be wrong. A little sweetness might help you sleep." I took the pie and thanked her with a smile. No words needed to be said, but the look in her eyes grounded me. Perhaps those who've known loss can always recognize the face of someone who's just lost faith. When the door closed behind me, I looked at the pie, then back at the words in my notebook. Transparency begins tonight. I knew I had crossed the threshold between pain and truth. And from that moment on, I was no longer the betrayed wife. I was the witness of an unspoken justice. I didn't have to wait long to watch Weston begin to crumble. Around 8 o'clock, the hallway echoed with the sound of a turning key, and then he walked in, holding a bouquet of red roses and a small jewelry box wrapped in silver paper. The scent of Bleu de Chanel filled the room, a fragrance I once adored, now sickening. He gave a weak smile. "I know you're upset tonight, but we shouldn't let a misunderstanding ruin everything, right?" I leaned against the kitchen counter, eyes fixed on him. "A misunderstanding? Did you buy those flowers with Aurora Dynamics money or with your Panama funds?" Weston's face went pale, as if someone had just slapped him. He froze, eyes darting, scrambling to gauge how much I knew. What are you talking about? What Panama?" I opened the laptop and turned the screen toward him. The PDF file was already up, titled Silver Horizon Holdings Limited, Panama City. I spoke slowly, enunciating each word. "I didn't know you were bilingual, Weston." "In English and money," he stammered, voice dry. It was just temporary transfers, an investment firm. Tiffany misunderstood. I raised an eyebrow, offered a faint smile, but it was colder than steel. Then why did you sign 3 times? And why did it all coincide with your promotion? He stepped forward, tried to reach for my hand, voice pleading. Kimberly, you know me. I did this for our future. I needed a separate fund to protect our assets. In case the company had issues, I stepped back, pulling my hand away. No, Weston. You did this for greed. You weren't protecting anyone but yourself. Silence fell. The ticking of the wall clock echoed, and I could hear his shallow breath. Weston glanced around the kitchen like it had turned from a home into an interrogation room. He threw the flowers onto the counter. You think you know everything? You don't understand the pressure I'm under. You're just the outsider, judging. I let out a quiet laugh. Yes, I'm outside. Because you never let anyone in. And you chose betrayal over honesty. At the height of tension, the bedroom door creaked open. Meredith, our 7-year-old daughter in pink pajamas, clutching her teddy bear, stepped out, sleepy-eyed. Did Daddy make Mommy cry? I froze, suddenly aware of the tears running down my cheeks. My throat tightened. I knelt down, stroked her hair, and forced my voice calm. It's okay, sweetheart. Daddy just forgot. That truth matters more than gifts. Weston lowered his head, avoiding her eyes. He stepped back toward the stairs, silent, then muttered, I'll stay at a hotel tonight. I stood up, arms folded. You should. And Weston, before you go, take your laptop. I don't need anything else here that smells like lies. He looked at me briefly, then grabbed his suitcase and walked out. The door shut gently, but its echo thundered through the hollow house. I turned back, picked up Meredith, and soothed her to sleep. As her eyelids closed, I sat beside the bed, watching her face in the warm glow of the nightlight. I told myself, for her, I will not fall. That night, I didn't sleep. At 2 a.m., I made coffee, reopened David's emails, and reviewed every file I'd sent. The numbers from the Panama account danced before my eyes, mocking me. I knew, one wrong move, and Weston wouldn't just lose this marriage, he'd lose everything. But for me, this was no longer about revenge. It was about justice, about the transparency I once taught him to value. I opened my notebook and wrote another line beneath the first. If truth costs peace, I'll still pay in full. The next morning, as the autumn sunlight filtered through the curtains, I was still sitting there, my eyes burning from a sleepless night. The house was so quiet, I could hear the ticking of the clock, and in my head, one word echoed relentlessly. Prove. Not to seek revenge, but to confirm that I wasn't crazy, that everything I felt was real. I didn't want to be dismissed as a bitter wife making things up. I wanted the truth to speak for itself. I called Tess Moreno, my close friend and also the accountant at Aurora Dynamics. She picked up, her voice noticeably hushed. Kimberly, I heard about yesterday. The whole office is buzzing. Tiffany suddenly took leave, and Weston missed this morning's meeting. The CEO's been questioning everyone. I took a deep breath. Tess, I need to see you. Now 30 minutes later, I was at her midtown Detroit apartment, a red brick building with a small balcony full of crimson maple trees where she lived with her aging cat, Whiskey. She opened the door, worry written all over her face. Kimberly, this could get messy. You shouldn't be involved. I stepped inside and set my coffee cup on the table. I'm not here on emotion. I need information. Something's wrong inside Aurora, and I believe Weston's involved. Tess sat across from me, fingers interlaced, her voice trembling. Last week, while I was auditing the communication department's expense logs from 2 years ago, I found 3 advertising contracts totaling $1.2 million. But something was off. They were signed with companies that don't actually exist. No tax ID, no office address. Even their websites had been taken down. What's stranger is that the person who handled those accounts, Allison Grant, a senior accountant at the time, was suddenly let go. No reason, no warning. She just got an email saying contract terminated effective immediately. When I asked HR, they said it was a senior management decision. But I remember Allison being meticulous. She once told me there were some mismatched expenditures, and then she vanished from the system within 48 hours. Tess inhaled deeply, staring down into her coffee, her hand slightly trembling. When I asked Weston about these contracts, he just said it was a confidential project, overseen directly by CFO Tiffany. He told me not to be nosy, then laughed, like I'd asked something stupid. Kimberly, I feel like I've walked into a hornet's nest. I stayed silent for a moment, then asked softly, "Do you have proof?" Tess nodded and pulled a small black USB drive from her bag. I copied everything: internal emails, payment ledgers, e-signatures. But if this gets out, I could lose my job, maybe even get sued. I looked her straight in the eye, my voice firm. If you're standing for the truth, you're not alone. You're not a saboteur. You're doing the right thing. She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. I trust you, Kimberly. I've just never dealt with the SEC or this kind of legal mess. I plugged the USB into my laptop. The screen lit up with spreadsheets, records, and transfer logs hidden behind coded aliases. Advision Group LLC. North Bay Media Solutions. Clearstream Digital. No addresses, just strings of Panama bank account numbers. It felt like stripping paint off a wall, only to find rot beneath. Tess looked at me, uneasy. If I give you this data, I'm betraying the company. I replied, my voice low but unwavering. No, you're saving it. Aurora needs to know they've been deceived, not hide it. I immediately sent the files to David Cho via an encrypted link, adding a note. Urgent, potential SEC violation. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone rang. David's tone was direct, his voice steady but tense. Kimberly, this is real financial fraud. These transactions were stealth withdrawals authorized by Weston and Tiffany. Aurora is a public company. They are required to report this to the SEC. If you're ready to file as a whistleblower, I'll guide you through the proper protocol. I went silent, then said, Then let's begin. I won't allow justice to be delayed another day. After sending the files, I sat by Tess's window. The Detroit sky was turning gray, red maple leaves shaking in the season's early chill. Down below, morning commuters hurried past, unaware that just a few floors above, two women had just opened the door to an investigation that could shake an entire corporation. Tess sat beside me, her voice soft but steady. Kimberly, do you think you'll win? Going up against them won't be easy. I gave a faint smile. I'm not thinking in terms of winning or losing anymore. I'm thinking about right and wrong, and this time I won't be silent. She looked at me, eyes glistening, then nodded. Okay. I'm with you. I gently squeezed Tess's hand, feeling a quiet strength ripple between us. The strength of women once underestimated, now choosing to stand for the truth. I left her apartment as a light rain began to fall. The wind bit colder, the scent of metal and gasoline thick in the Detroit air. I took a deep breath. My lungs stung, but my mind was clear. The door to justice had opened, and once I stepped through, there would be no turning back. Before getting in my car, my phone buzzed. A message from David Cho appeared on the screen. I've reviewed everything. I'll draft a legal memo, anonymous, and send it directly to Aurora's legal department. That will compel the CEO to initiate an internal investigation. You won't need to go public, at least not yet. I stared at the words, my grip on the phone tightening. Outside, the rain had lightened but grown colder. Are you sure? I texted back. Yes. This is the safest and most lawful approach. Once the documents are in their hands, they can't ignore it. I looked at the streetlights reflected on the hood of my car, thinking of everything that was about to unfold. My life had once been orderly and pristine. Now it was about to be upended. But I knew David was right. If I wanted to bring down this wall of deception, I had to make it collapse from within. I tucked my phone away, started the engine, and drove toward downtown. Rain splattered the windshield, but inside me, for the first time in years, something was burning. Not rage, but a belief in justice. 3 days later, it began. Aurora Dynamics officially launched an internal financial audit, a review of all spending from the past 2 years. Employees were asked to turn in their laptops for data scans. No one said it outright, but everyone knew the truth. Something was deeply wrong between the finance and communications departments. The first update came from Tess on Monday morning. Her voice trembled on the phone. Kimberly, CEO Soren Patel, called me into his office. He asked about the expenses, about Allison Grant, and about Weston's approval signatures. I told him I'd only discovered it recently, and then he just sat in silence for minutes. I heard Tess swallow hard on the other end. Tiffany just emailed in her resignation, citing health issues and work stress, but everyone knows she's trying to slip away. The rumors spread faster than I expected. At Aurora HQ, the once pristine glass corridors felt eerily quiet. Employees whispered as they passed finance. Internal group chats buzzed. People said Weston and Tiffany were under surveillance, and that the CEO had flown in auditors from Chicago. I sat in my small office at Midwest Connect Media, staring out the window at Detroit's traffic inching along under fading streetlights. Everything was unfolding just as I predicted, but I knew silence for too long could let the story be rewritten. I wouldn't let that happen. I opened my laptop and began a new email. The subject line was simple. Subject: Important. Evidence of financial misconduct by senior managers. I typed slowly, deliberately. Dear Mr. Soren Patel, I am in possession of evidence related to violations of financial transparency regulations committed by 2 senior managers at Aurora Dynamics, including falsified advertising contracts and undeclared international transactions. I believe that, as a publicly traded company listed on NASDAQ, Aurora has an obligation to report this matter to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. I am willing to cooperate, provide documentation, and testify if necessary. Sincerely, Kimberly Evans, Independent Consultant, Communications Ethics Specialist. I read it over once, then hit send. The moment the message went out, I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding, feeling like I'd stepped into a zone with no return. I was no longer an outsider. I was the whistleblower. And in America, that always comes with risk. An hour later, my phone buzzed. Soren replied with just one line. Thank you, Mrs. Evans. I would like to meet in person, 9 a.m. tomorrow, Guardian Building. I put the phone down and stared out the window. Early snow had begun to fall, light flakes landing softly on the balcony railing. The whole city felt like it was holding its breath. I knew tomorrow morning would not be just a meeting, but the beginning of a war between truth and power, between a betrayed woman and an empire built on secrets. Tuesday morning, Detroit's sky was cloaked in thick gray, and the wind from the river whipped at my coat as I walked through the towering glass doors of the Guardian Building, Aurora Dynamics headquarters. Inside, the air was unusually cold and still. I was led to the 31st floor, the executive boardroom, where light spilled through tall windows onto sleek oak tables. The Aurora Dynamics logo gleamed on the wall like a reminder. This place, once built on reputation, now stood on trial before the truth. Soren Patel, Aurora's CEO, stood as I entered. He was in his early 50s, of Indian descent, tall, with a voice that was calm but firm. Beside him sat the company's legal counsel, Rebecca Klein, diligently taking notes. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Evans, he said, motioning for me to sit. I believe we share the same goal, to protect this company from collapse due to wrongdoing. I opened my bag and placed a USB drive and a thick envelope of printed documents on the table. What you're about to see, I said, is not rumor. It's evidence. I plugged the USB into his laptop. The screen lit up with the video. Weston and Tiffany kissing in the parking lot. Clear, undeniable. I didn't speak. Then I opened the PDF file titled Silver Horizon Report.pdf, showing the Panama account statements, wire transfers, and 3 fake advertising contracts worth $1.2 million. I pointed to the electronic signatures. These are the signatures of Weston Evans, Director of Communications, and Tiffany Maxwell, Chief Financial Officer. Both approved fund transfers to shell companies that do not exist. The room grew heavy with silence. Soren removed his glasses, leaning back, eyes steeling. If this is accurate, he said, Aurora will be required to file with the SEC in Chicago. This isn't just financial misconduct. It's a violation of federal securities law. I met his gaze, my voice calm but resolute. I don't want a scandal. I don't want Aurora to fall. I want justice and transparency. Soren remained quiet for a long moment, then nodded. You're right. We can't hide behind the brand anymore. He turned to Rebecca. Prepare a whistleblower confidentiality agreement. Mrs. Evans will sign it here. Rebecca opened her case, pulled out a legal document, and handed it to me. I read it carefully. Clear clauses protecting my identity, prohibiting disclosure, and granting immunity from any career retaliation. I signed my name, my hand trembling slightly, but firm. Kimberly Evans. Soren looked at me, his voice low. From this moment, you are considered a cooperating party with the Internal Investigation Committee. I will assign an independent audit team from Chicago. They'll conduct a full review. As for you, prepare yourself. When the truth begins to surface, it will drag up more than you expect. I stood, shook his hand. I'm ready, Mr. Patel. I've lost everything once by staying silent. This time, I'll speak. As I stepped out of the boardroom, I caught my reflection in the hallway glass. No longer the betrayed wife, but a woman holding the detonator of truth. Outside, light snow drifted over Campus Martius, melting fast on the damp pavement. I drew a deep breath, realizing I had now fully entered a war with no retreat, between justice, reputation, and the memory of who I used to be. 2 days after that meeting, everything inside Aurora Dynamics changed so fast, no one could catch their breath. The door to the legal department remained shut, the office lights burning late into the night. Those who had worked with Weston began receiving emails from the legal compliance department, requesting confirmation on contract approval procedures within communications. All accounting records from the past 2 years were recalled, and Aurora's legal team officially confirmed what no one wanted to believe. The Silver Horizon Holdings Limited account, opened in Panama, listed 2 primary beneficiaries, Weston Evans and Tiffany Maxwell. A string of internal emails was decrypted, including several in which Tiffany issued temporary transfer orders, and Weston approved them within 5 minutes. No one could deny it any longer. A summary report was quickly sent to CEO Soren Patel, and in accordance with the Corporate Transparency Act, 2024, and FATCA, Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, Aurora was obligated to report the incident to the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, in the Chicago region. This was no longer just an internal violation. It had become a federal investigation with potential impacts on the company's stock and reputation. I received an email from Soren. Thank you for your cooperation. We are taking every necessary legal step. Weston Evans has been suspended indefinitely, pending the investigation outcome. The news spread like wildfire. Local tech media outlets began reporting anonymously on a major internal fraud at Aurora Dynamics. Company shares dipped slightly, employees buzzed with rumors, and the PR department worked around the clock to manage damage control. I knew sooner or later they would trace the source of the data, me. But I had no regrets. That afternoon, Weston showed up at the doorstep of what used to be our home, now just my daughter and me. He stood beneath the awning, his face worn, his suit wrinkled, his eyes wet and lost. When I opened the door, he stepped forward and rasped, "Kimberly, you don't understand. The SEC will destroy me. You could save me. Just say you made a mistake, that it was a misunderstanding." I crossed my arms and looked at him, hollow inside. "A mistake? You kissed your CFO in a parking lot, signed off 3 times on a Panama account, fired someone for asking questions, and you call that a mistake?" His shoulders slumped, voice barely above a whisper. "I know I messed up, but you're destroying everything I built over the past 10 years. I stepped closer, standing straight, looking him dead in the eye. "I'm not destroying anything, Weston. I just turned on the light, and light, by itself, burns through anything dishonest." He stood still, lips trembling, unable to speak. Rain drummed softly on the awning above us, and in that moment, I understood. To him, justice meant ruin. To me, it meant salvation. Weston turned and walked down the steps, carrying no flowers this time. I closed the door behind him, surprisingly calm. I hadn't won. I hadn't lost. I had simply chosen truth. On my desk, David Cho's email blinked with one final line. "The SEC has accepted the file. They are reviewing whether to open a formal investigation. Be prepared, Kimberly. The next stage won't just be about truth, but how you protect yourself." I stared at that sentence for a long time, then turned off the screen. In the faint reflection on the windowpane, I saw my face no longer trembling, only the stillness of someone who had come too far to turn back. 2 weeks later, Aurora Dynamics reached the point of no return. That morning, the entire executive floor of the Guardian building was sealed off for an emergency board meeting. Frosted glass concealed the room, guards lined the hallway, and employees passing by only dared glance before lowering their heads. The news spread quickly. "The board is meeting. SEC attorneys are present." I stepped into the room, white light illuminating a long oval oak table. At its head sat board chairwoman Miriam Layton, elderly but commanding. Beside her, CEO Soren Patel and 2 SEC attorneys from the Chicago office. The air was thick, courtroom-like. Every board member had a printed copy of the internal investigation report, nearly 200 pages, alongside the USB containing the video and Panama documents I had submitted. The SEC attorney began. "The evidence has been verified. Transactions under Silver Horizon Holdings Limited match Aurora Dynamics records. A $1.2 million withdrawal was approved by 2 senior managers, Weston Evans and Tiffany Maxwell. Both violated financial transparency regulations under the Corporate Transparency Act, and FATCAI sat quietly, fingers interlaced, feeling strangely detached yet intimately bound to this room. Once a symbol of my husband's dreams, now the site of their collapse, as the video of Weston and Tiffany in the parking lot played on the big screen. Silence reigned. Chairwoman Layton closed the file and spoke clearly. "Based on the investigation and the recommendation of legal compliance and the SEC, the board unanimously moves to terminate Weston Evans and Tiffany Maxwell, with cause, meaning they forfeit all stock benefits and pending bonuses. HR is tasked with revoking their access, laptops, and company property within 24 hours. Weston sat at the far end of the table, pale and expressionless. He didn't look at me. Tiffany, her hair tied back, face rigid, gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. I felt no triumph, only as if someone had shut the lid on a coffin containing 10 years of my former life. Chairwoman Layton turned to me, her voice softer. "Ms. Evans, on behalf of the board, we thank you for choosing truth, even when it wasn't easy. Aurora needs people like you to restore trust," Soren continued, eyes meeting mine solemnly. "The board has voted unanimously. We would like to appoint you as Global Communications Director for Aurora Dynamics. You will be responsible for restructuring external affairs and rebuilding the company's image and ethical communication standards. I took a deep breath, looking down at the folder in front of me. That title, a few months ago, it might have moved me to tears. Now, it wasn't a victory, but a responsibility. I looked up and spoke slowly. I accept. But under one condition, all eyes turned toward me. I said, Tess Moreno, who helped collect the data and provided the first pieces of evidence, was suspended during the investigation. I want her reinstated and officially appointed head of accounting. Without her, Aurora wouldn't have found the truth. Chairwoman Layton looked to Soren. He nodded without hesitation. Agreed. It will be done today. The tension in the room eased slightly. A few board members nodded. One even smiled. Chairwoman Layton added, her voice warm. Justice isn't revenge. It's the restoration of balance. Thank you, Kimberly, I only nodded. As I stepped out into the hallway, the quiet was so deep I could hear my heels echo against the marble floor. I glanced back at the Aurora logo behind me. The sunlight from the glass windows bathed it in a glow, as if it were being cleansed of its shadows. And I knew, this journey wasn't over. But today, at least, the truth had been named. A month after the board meeting, as snow blanketed the streets around Campus Martius in Detroit, I received a notice from the Wayne County Courthouse. The divorce filing between Weston Evans and me had been accepted. I stared at the header. Case number 24D0317, Evans versus Evans, feeling both relief and a sharp ache. After 10 years of marriage, everything between us now fit into a half-inch stack of papers stamped in red. The preliminary hearing took place in a small courtroom, warmer than I expected. Outside, snow still fell like powdered salt. David Cho sat beside me, giving a steady nod of reassurance, while across the table, Weston sat with his head bowed, his face so hollow I barely recognized him. He wore a gray suit, a ghost of the confident communications director who once addressed hundreds. Judge Evelyn Carr opened the file and read aloud the findings. Based on verified financial evidence from Aurora Dynamics and the SEC report from the Chicago region, the defendant Weston Evans has admitted to violating financial transparency regulations. Both parties have agreed to a civil settlement in which the defendant will repay $420,000 to plaintiff Kimberly Evans to avoid criminal prosecution and close the matter at the company level. I heard David exhale softly. Weston looked up, eyes glistening, but I felt no anger anymore, only emptiness. He signed the papers with a trembling hand, then set the pen down. In the back row, Martha Klein, the elderly neighbor who once brought me an apple pie the night I uncovered the betrayal, sat quietly. As I stepped out of the courtroom, she gently took my arm and said in a low, warm voice, filled with hard-won wisdom, "Justice isn't revenge, dear. It's repair." I gave a tired smile and nodded. Maybe she was right. I wasn't seeking victory, just for the cracks to be mended, so my daughter could grow up in truth, not illusion. In the final ruling, Judge Carr flipped to a new page. Considering the emotional impact on the minor Meredith Evans, the court recommends 12 months of psychological therapy to support recovery. All therapy expenses will be covered by Mr. Weston Evans. Per the divorce agreement, I nodded in agreement, adding nothing more. Weston remained silent. Between us, there were no more words to mend or to wound. As I left the courthouse, snow still fell heavily. I pulled my collar tight, stood on the steps, and watched the flakes melt on my leather gloves. Martha handed me a cup of hot coffee and said, "Now go live the rest of your life." I whispered back, "I will." But this time, I'll live it honestly, not for anyone else. In the distance, church bells echoed through the snow, mingling with the sound of the streetcar gliding down Woodward. And I knew, in a world grown cold, justice had just found its warmth again. Not in fire, but in light. 3 months after the trial, spring arrived in Detroit, with its first warm winds. Sunlight glistened on the surface of the Detroit River like glass. At the top floor of the Detroit Marriott, at the Renaissance Center, a team of dozens worked tirelessly on the final touches for what the press had dubbed the Gala for Transparency. I, Kimberly Evans, now Global Communications Director of Aurora Dynamics, walked through the grand ballroom where crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over tables draped in pristine white linen. Every detail, from the stage backdrop and lighting to the slogan "Building Trust in the Age of Truth," had been personally approved by me. Bouquets of white hydrangeas sat precisely at the center of each table, simple yet regal. Tonight, Aurora would face the American media, investors, and shareholders with a declaration that we had recovered, not through a PR campaign, but through truth. A new financial transparency report, the Ethics Rebuilt initiative, and internal whistleblower protection policies would all be unveiled. As technicians adjusted the sound system, I stood by the glass wall facing the river. In the distance, the orange-red sunset reflected off the Guardian building, where it had all begun. In that moment, I understood that justice is not just a verdict, but an entire ecosystem rebuilt atop ruins. I turned to the director's table, where Tess Moreno was reviewing the guest list. She wore a black blazer and a badge reading Head of Accounting, a faint smile on her lips. When she saw me, she raised a thumbs up and joked quietly, "You know, if someone told me last year I'd be attending an Aurora Gala without cooking the books, I wouldn't have believed them." I laughed and replied, "Actually, no one deserves to be here more than you." At precisely 8 p.m., the jazz band began to play the opening tune. I walked onto the stage, a soft spotlight falling over me as hundreds of eyes turned in my direction. I took a deep breath, then lifted the microphone and began the speech I had carefully prepared, though the most important part I had rewritten just that morning. In communications, we sometimes believe the only way to fix a cracked mirror is to shatter it. But I've learned, when a mirror is covered in dust, you don't need to break it. You simply wipe it clean with truth. Transparency isn't about exposing others' faults. It's about having the courage to face your own shadow. The room fell utterly silent. I saw the eyes of employees who once lived in fear now glowing with something new, and in that moment, I knew I had chosen the right way to tell the story. No affair videos, no dramatic exposé, just one truth spoken calmly. As I stepped off stage, Tess was waiting in the wings, smiling proudly. She whispered as I passed, "You didn't just clean the mirror, Kimberly. You lit up the whole room." I smiled softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. Outside, applause erupted. Not for me, but for a new world being rebuilt on integrity and courage. The lights in the ballroom dimmed, and the large LED screen behind the stage lit up with the words, "Gala for Transparency, live on CNBC Detroit." The jazz music softened, and the MC's voice rang out, "Please welcome the Global Communications Director of Aurora Dynamics, Kimberly Evans." I stepped onto the stage for the second time that night, surrounded by hundreds of guests in formal attire. Warm golden light bathed my face, catching on the pearl earrings, the only gift I'd kept from my former marriage. Below, the CNBC Detroit cameras panned slowly, broadcasting live across the Michigan region. I scanned the room, took a deep breath, and began the final part of my speech. No longer a corporate report, but a message to everyone who had ever placed their trust in Aurora. Transparency is not just a policy. It's a culture. It's the commitment that no matter how deep the darkness, we still choose the light. Aurora lost its way once, but tonight we stand together, clearing the dust from the mirror so we can finally see ourselves clearly. I paused, letting the silence settle. Then I glanced toward the back row of the room, where I saw Tiffany Maxwell sitting quietly, her hair neatly tied back, a badge on her neck that read, "Contract Staff Finance." No special seat, no spotlight. Her face showed no emotion, only the weariness of someone who had once stood at the top and fallen hard. Weston was absent. No one knew where he was. Some said he'd left Detroit. Others, that he was job hunting in Chicago. But in my heart, his absence was already an answer. I closed the speech with a single, quiet sentence, something I had held in my heart through months of storms. The truth doesn't destroy us. It only destroys what was never worthy of us. For a moment, silence enveloped the room. Then the entire ballroom rose in unison. Applause thundered around me, continuing so long I had to bow twice. The cameras scanned the faces of board members, Soren Patel, Miriam Leighton, and the major stakeholders, all applauding. The air in that room wasn't just admiration, it was recognition of a journey from collapse to justice. Chairwoman Leighton joined me on stage and shook my hand. Her voice, soft but firm, carried over the microphone. Aurora hasn't just restored its name. We've learned something far greater, a lesson in character. Applause again. I turned toward the grand windows of the ballroom, where the city lights of Detroit shimmered on the surface of the river. In that light, I saw a faint reflection of myself, no longer trembling, no longer afraid, but steady, calm, and free. The gala ended with a song titled A New Dawn. As guests filtered out, Tess approached and took my hand. "You did it, Kimberly," she said. I smiled and replied, "No, we did it." The buildings along the Detroit River stayed lit all night, as if the entire city had witnessed the rebirth of something long buried. Not hope, not victory, but trust. 1 month after the gala, my daughter and I left our old house in Birmingham, the one that had silently witnessed so much unraveling, and moved into a small apartment in Midtown Detroit, just a few blocks from the river, where the Ambassador Bridge was visible from our balcony. The 7th-floor unit was bright and quiet, with white walls and wide windows that caught the morning sun. I hung a small print that read, "Begin again. No flourish, no noise, just a reminder that I was still alive, and this time I was living for myself." Work at Aurora had stabilized. I stepped back from the high-pressure meetings and focused on a project I'd dreamt about during countless sleepless nights, a podcast called Women Who Rebuilt, recorded at WDET 101.9 FM Detroit. Each episode was a real conversation between women who had fallen and then rebuilt their lives. I didn't want to tell shocking stories. I wanted to speak of resilience, of cracks, and how light gets through them. I remember the first recording, a small studio, walls lined with acoustic foam, a light wood table, and 2 sleek black microphones facing each other. I sat in a beige chair, eyes closed, breathing deep as the red, on-air light lit up. My voice came out low and calm. "Welcome to Women Who Rebuilt, where we don't talk about failure, but about how people recover from ruin." I'm Kimberly Evans, and today we begin with Chapter 1. Justice as Healing. My first guest was Martha Klein, my former neighbor, who once stood beside me outside the courthouse and said the words I've carried ever since. "Justice isn't revenge, dear. It's repair." I asked her about life after losing her husband to cancer and how she found quiet joy tending to her backyard apple trees. She spoke slowly, warmly, truthfully. We never go back to who we were before the pain. But if we're patient, we become someone new, someone who can understand another's sorrow. In that moment, I realized life doesn't need to be healed in dazzling ways. Sometimes, it just needs to be told, to be heard, and to be believed. The first episode aired on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and WDET's website. I didn't expect much, just hoped a few hundred might listen. But 3 months later, the comms team reported back a number that stunned me. Over 500,000 listens, mostly women aged 40 to 70, many of whom emailed to say they played my podcast while cooking, driving, or simply needing someone to tell them it would be okay. I read every email, every thank you note, and realized something unexpected. Justice doesn't only come from a court or a ruling. It comes from one person telling the truth, so others know they're not alone. That night, I stepped onto the balcony and looked out over the Detroit River. In the distance, the Ambassador Bridge shimmered like a silver ribbon in the dark. I held a cup of ginger tea, leaned on the railing, and smiled. I was no longer Weston Evans' wife. I was Kimberly, a survivor, a truth teller, and someone rebuilding the world on her own terms. In the wind sweeping across the bridge, I thought, maybe justice isn't just an ending, but the beginning of our truest life. One Saturday morning in early summer, I drove with Meredith to the Detroit Counseling Center, a small building nestled in the New Center district where sun always poured through the windows. Dr. Renee Harris, a child psychologist, greeted us with a gentle smile. Her office was painted cream, lined with bookshelves, and a corner for kids to draw. I sat on a long couch, watching Meredith carefully place her teddy bear on the table before turning to me with eyes suddenly too serious for a 7-year-old. "Are you happy, Mommy?" I froze. A small question, but it reached the deepest place I'd been avoiding. I smiled softly, brushing her hair. "Now I am. Because I don't have to pretend anymore." Meredith looked at me, then smiled in that knowing way children often do, as if they understand more than we think. She turned back to her paper and drew a house with 2 people, a mother and daughter, beneath a sky full of light. I looked at the picture and felt like I was finally allowed to breathe, fully, after years of trying to live inside someone else's version of me. That therapy session had no tears, just a quiet sense of peace. As we left the center, I held her small, warm hand. We walked along Woodward Avenue, bought vanilla ice cream, and watched streetcars pass by. Detroit, a city of comebacks and new beginnings, seemed to smile with us. A week later, Tess Moreno called. Her voice held a new kind of joy I'd never heard before. "Kimberly, I just resigned from Aurora. I'm starting my own firm, ClearPoint Consulting. I want to build a service for financial ethics and corporate culture advisory." I smiled, not surprised. "Great name, and you know what? I want in 20% equity." Tess laughed over the phone. "I knew you'd say that. But honestly, I just want you with me. Aurora may be the last chapter, but what we learned there deserves a new one." A few days later, we met at Starbucks Reserve Detroit, housed in the old Guardian Bank building, red brick laced with golden light. Our table by the window faced the river, afternoon sun slanting over steaming cappuccinos. Tess opened her laptop and laid out plans for a new event. It's called Women in Integrity, a space for female leaders, therapists, and those who've faced workplace betrayal. Not just a seminar, but a sanctuary, a place where women can speak truth without fear of punishment. I nodded, pride swelling silently. "We started from wreckage, Tess. Now it's time to plant trust." She smiled and raised her cup. "To the women brave enough to begin again." I clinked mine against hers. "And to those who choose truth, even when it costs them everything." Outside the window, the Detroit River blushed with sunset. I looked toward the Ambassador Bridge and felt stillness settle inside me. No more pain to outrun, only connections growing between me, my daughter, Tess, and every woman learning to live honestly in a world of masks. And maybe that's the ultimate form of justice, not delivered by verdict, but by choosing to love life again in our own truth. A year later, Detroit had changed, and so had I. Aurora Dynamics had become a model for transparency, while I transitioned from corporate leadership into community work, a path with no paycheck, but filled with purpose. I spent more than 6 months finalizing legal paperwork, and in spring 2025, the Midwest Integrity Fund was officially recognized as a 501c3 nonprofit. Born from my story, the fund's mission belonged to hundreds of women, those financially manipulated by partners, families, or employers. We partnered with the Michigan Women's Foundation, offering workshops on money management, whistleblower rights, and psychological counseling for those seeking to reclaim control. I wanted them to know justice isn't a privilege of the powerful. It begins with understanding and owning your own money. On launch day, I sat in a small office overlooking Jefferson Avenue. On the wall hung a black and white photo frame of 3 women: Martha Klein, who taught me that justice is repair; Tess, who dared to tell the truth; and Meredith, my daughter, who made me believe in the future. I realized this was no longer just my fight. It had become a legacy of truth and courage. When the Women's Leadership in Detroit 2025, the Midwest's largest female leadership conference, invited me to speak, it took me 2 days to write my speech. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted every word to come from the truest part of what I'd lived. That morning, the TCF Center was packed with over 2,000 people. The lights dimmed as I stepped on stage in a soft ivory suit, tailored and simple. In the front row sat Martha and Tess, smiling, as if walking every step of the journey with me. I began. 2 years ago, I thought justice was something separate from me. A courtroom, a verdict, something others delivered. But I was wrong. Justice begins the moment we stop hiding who we are, stop excusing what's false, and choose to step into the light. The hall fell silent. The only sound was the click of cameras. I looked across the crowd. Entrepreneurs, students, workers, each woman carrying her own untold story. I ended with a final line, steady and slow. Transparency isn't just a business principle. It's how we love ourselves. Through truth, applause thundered through the auditorium like a wave. Some rose to their feet, tears glistening. I bowed, knowing that this time, the light shining on me wasn't recognition. It was resonance. Outside, spring had arrived in Detroit. Cherry blossoms lined the riverbank, and the breeze carried the scent of coffee from a small midtown cafe. I stepped out into the sun, felt its warmth on my shoulders, and heard Martha whisper behind me, "See, dear?" "You turned your pain into purpose," I smiled and replied. "Not just purpose, a path others can follow to find themselves." In that moment, I realized I was truly free. Not because I'd escaped the past, but because I'd turned it into light for someone else's road. One spring morning, I woke earlier than usual. A pale sunlight slipped through the curtains and onto the light rug of my midtown apartment. I laced up my shoes, put in my earbuds, and jogged along the Detroit Riverwalk, the asphalt still damp with dew. The early air was crisp, blending the scent of river water with coffee from nearby cafes. In the distance, Belle Isle Bridge arched into view, its curves like ripples connecting sky and water. I slowed my pace, stopping at the railing to look out over the river. The sunlight danced on the surface, scattering into 1,000 glittering shards, like broken glass reassembled, imperfect but beautiful in its own way. I smiled softly, realizing that was the shape of my life. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, and there it was. A name I thought I'd long forgotten. Weston. The message was short, no embellishments, no excuses. "I'm sorry." I lost everything. I stared at the words for a long time. The river breeze tugged at my hair. I inhaled, then slowly pressed delete. No anger, no triumph, just closure. I didn't need his apology. What was lost no longer deserved to be redeemed. I tucked the phone away, zipped up my jacket, and kept running. My stride matched my breath, my feet steady on the path. Ahead, the sun rose higher, casting golden light across the water. Radiant, clear, unhidden. My voice played in the closing voiceover of a special podcast episode I'd recorded the night before. The final chapter in a 2-year journey. He lost everything through lies, and I found everything through truth. If you believe truth has the power to heal, share this story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me, what have you had to rebuild in your life? Because sometimes, all it takes is one honest word to light the way forward.